have been a carpenter. Where would they fit?
I'll start, but no matter who the question is asked to, each of us will feel free to come in on it, right? The interesting thing is that when Mark says that Jesus was a tecton, which we translate as a carpenter and gives us a very wrong idea, both Matthew and Luke are clearly embarrassed by it, that Matthew says his father was rather than Jesus was a tecton, and Luke leaves the whole incident out, which is the usual way that Luke handles things he doesn't like, just omit it. Matthew tends to change it, Luke tends to omit it. I find both of them, and I expect this, are embarrassed by the idea that Jesus is a tecton. I think a good modern translation that would take some of the same social message might be a laborer. Jesus was a laborer. I mean, I'm carrying the prejudice over. So a tecton, a carpenter, does not give us any idea what it means in the first century. Jesus was a peasant in a small, incredibly small village. It's getting smaller every time archaeologists look at it. Tiny village. That says nothing about anything beyond that. Many scholars were appalled when I said he was a peasant because they thought peasants were dumb. I never thought that, so I never made that mistake. We made it in Vietnam. I thought we got over that. Jesus was a peasant.
This is an interesting question because I remember watching a TV evangelist at one point who was at great pains to explain that Jesus was a rich kid, not a poor kid.
Yeah.
And you wonder why that was so important to him, right? Why would that case have been so important to somebody who was then about to proclaim the gospel of prosperity? Because we are ashamed by talking about laborers. We're ashamed, and not just, laborers might be too generic yet. Talk about construction worker.
Yeah.
Talk about somebody who works with their hands and who may not have a permanent position, more like a day laborer even.
Yeah.
But the theological point is, this is not just a historical observation. This is how God works in this world. That's part of that interesting resistance movement that gets going here. Very much tied to laborers, to workers.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to be gender inclusive because I'm a female. I'm wondering what the Christian right or our political environment today, if we haven't become the very empire that you're talking about, because as we argue that Christ is the way as opposed to Christ is a way, do Christians often not say there is no alternative but Christ? And so I'm curious how the religious right, the fundamentalist Christians, the huge growth in the prosperity Christianity mentality, how that works with empire. And I'm coming from a perspective of having a master's of divinity, but now moving beyond the church and now pursuing social work because I was frustrated with the church institution and now wanting to get my hands with those laborers.
So what you're saying, just to understand your question, you feel the Christian right is putting us in that situation where there is no alternative but this one way?
I think that I have friends who are Christian who say that Christ is the only way. There's not room for any other belief system or alternative. And by definition, you said empire says there is no alternative way. So therefore, is the Christian fundamentalist view, has it become empire?
You want me to go ahead?
Yes, go ahead.
This. I need to ask for permission first. But I think this is very much what we're facing, And here the thing is not just that there is one way that's suggested. The real question is, what way are we talking about? And if you look at it, that way that's oftentimes proposed by fundamentalism doesn't very much look like the sort of way of Jesus Christ that the Gospels are talking about. I do not recall that it makes a strong point about Jesus being a worker, or that it makes a strong point about this tension between Christ as Lord and the emperor as Lord. So oftentimes we're confronted here with a top-down position that tells us this is the way it's supposed to be, there's no alternative, which does not really respect the Christian tradition in itself. And if you look at the Christian tradition, there may be other ways even to talk about Jesus than this one way that we are made to believe we have to accept.
Yeah, also I think within Christianity, and I mean within Christianity, the statement, Jesus is the only way, is an act of passionate commitment. I don't see, well, I do see some differences. Let me speak as a man, for a man saying to the woman, you're the only woman in the world. I do think I understand that statement. Now, if the person thinks that the person addressed is the only woman in the world, we have a serious case of pathology. But as long as it's a passionate commitment, knowing that the other person over there can say exactly the same thing. So what religions have to learn is a passionate commitment to their own particularity, while being utterly aware that the same thing should be said in Islam and Judaism and any other religion. Otherwise, it's not religion. There's no generic religion. So passionate commitment to your own vision, while you're utterly aware, with full integrity, that the person over there may see exactly the same thing about Islam. Now, if either of them takes it literally, then we're into pathology and probably extermination, because the one way to be the only one is to kill everyone else. But I have no problem with passionate commitment that understands exactly what it's doing. And so I have no problem as a Christian to say, Christ is the way, the truth, and the life. There's no other way to the Father. Except, of course, some other religion.